let's go ahead. We'll kick things off today. Thanks for joining us today on the show. We're very happy to have you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. From the get-go, how about we have you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of the business entirely? Who are you as a person?
So I am a non-professional athlete. I like to do a lot of sports. I play hockey, I trail run, I practice jujitsu. I'm usually trying to get a good workout in. I have a great family that I like to spend a lot of time with. So my wife and 2 children keep us quite busy. I have a high schooler now and a middle schooler. So one about to drive and one thinking about driving. And I work a lot. I built this business and put it in my hometown. So I save a lot of commute time and I apply that to the business. So I'm here most days, 12 plus hours a day. So.
Absolutely. And prior to this business, what did your work life look like? What were you getting up to, kind of leading up to needing to do something else?
So my education was in engineering. It was as a kid growing up, I like to take things apart and I like to work on dirt bikes and engines and things of that nature. So when college time came, I didn't really have much exposure to other parts of the world from where I grew up. So engineering and tinkering with stuff was the only thing I knew really what I could go study and be satisfied. So I went into school for that and then came out and started designing consumer products. And that led to medical devices. And along the way, I went and got a graduate degree in mechanical engineering, which was the first time I had really been exposed to the business side of my education. So I took managerial accounting, business plan formation classes, participated in business plan competitions, and that was sort of my first introduction to probably entrepreneurship in general. And so then I wound up having a career that lasted about 10 years in engineering, designing products. And then I switched over to a mergers and acquisitions role, a corporate development role where we were looking at other technologies. And then it kind of came full circle where I was initially asked to assess the technology of these other companies. And then there was questions around the business, and it brought back some of the stuff I'd learned in graduate school around building business models and P&Ls and pitching basically the value of a business. Mm-hmm. And that's when it was like all the pieces fit together. It was like, it was like the puzzle was getting built in 2 different locations. And then I just saw how they all fit together. And then that entrepreneurial itch was just there. And I felt like I had all the tools. And at that point it was, do I believe in myself enough to take this leap? And it was many years questioning that, I'd say.
Definitely. And so was this the first business venture, or did you have any small little projects before this that you were trying to get out there in the world?
It was my first venture. I do like to think that, when I was a kid, I was actually an entrepreneur more than I was when I became an adult, right? When I was a kid, I grew up in urban New Jersey, and we were kids that were like hustlers. And so we had paper routes, and we shoveled snow, and we worked at gas stations and pharmacies. And we were always trying to figure out how to make a buck as a kid. And then when I went to college, I felt like I lost all that entrepreneurial spirit. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until about 15 years later that after graduating that it felt like I was on a different path than I was even on as a kid. And I'd known a lot of people to go start businesses. And that's when I was like, okay, well, let's make it a real venture, something different than when I was a kid, obviously. And so, yeah, this was my first go at a real company.
For sure. Well, obviously it's been successful, but let's go ahead. Tell us kind of where the idea came from, what spurred it on, how'd you theorize the whole thing?
So it came from necessity, personal necessity. So when I was a kid growing up playing hockey, that was my sport. This act of getting your skate sharpened was a task that everyone did in the sport, and they did it like dozens of times a year. And I didn't think much of it as a kid. It was just another chore that had to be done. And it was when I kind of got out into the working world, this is the early 2000s, and all of our worlds were being changed by Netflix and Amazon, and ways to get your dry cleaning done by just hanging it on your front door. There was all these things that were making my life easier, and I was still getting in the car to drive somewhere to have somebody sharpen my skates.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, oh man, this is really ripe for disruption. Somebody has to figure out a way to solve this problem such that it gets rid of almost like the last thing I need to do, where I have to drive somewhere to do something. And the first idea was to copy Netflix and send these skate blades around. I imagined there would be these distribution centers, scattered throughout North America. And I would put my skate blades in a sleeve, and I would put them in the mailbox. And then 2 days later, they would show up at my door sharpened. And while I was in graduate school, I actually tried pushing that concept through an Excel model, and was very disappointed when just the capital expenses and the personnel and the real estate and everything associated with trying to solve this problem like Netflix had done with DVDs, it just didn't scale, and it didn't seem like a business I could launch. And it was like later on that when I saw what Keurig had done with single serve coffee, and where they were subsidizing the capital equipment, that like the light bulb went off for me that, hey, that's maybe the plan, is that we build a tool that we sell for cheap, like a printer, and then we can fund the business on the consumables, which is like pretty much how everything works nowadays, right? It's cell phones, it's cable, it's everything is, we're using the fact that we're going to have a tail to the business through the consumption of consumables, so that we can get the capital, which is often very expensive, into the hands of the user.
Definitely.
So
it was
this,
once I saw that model, it was clear how we were going to solve the problem.
okay, let me understand a little bit about the product. For this sharpener, what is a consumable part?
So actually I can reach behind me. Hold on one second.
Okay.
So sitting behind me, actually, right over there, is our brewer. That's our Keurig coffee machine, if you will. Okay. That's what sharpens the skates. And then this is the consumable. So it's about the size of a poker chip. And I'll put it over here so you can see it. And this has about 20 different sizes. And this imparts a shape, a hollow, onto the bottom of the skate blade that dictates how much bite your skates will have with the ice. And so different players like different amounts of bite, depending on their position, their ability, their size, figure skater versus hockey skater. And that's our consumable.
Will this wear over time? They have to buy a new set once
Correct.
a while?
This right here will do anywhere from about 40 to 60 skate sharpenings. And then the user will have to replace it. The abrasive that's on here, this is a super abrasive. It's a diamond-like material that is getting consumed as the skate blade is being sharpened.
I see. What's the price for this?
This is $59 US.
Okay. What's the cost of the equipment there?
The equipment is $800.
Okay. Got it.
And just
thank you.
On the note of costs, generally, how much does it cost a person if they were to go somewhere to actually sharpen the skate themselves, or have somebody do it for them?
Absolutely. So it'll cost you in dollars when you arrive somewhere between $7 and $10 on average.
Mm-hmm.
But similar to, I'd say, dry cleaning or a movie that you rent from Comcast or from your cable provider, the cost that you're offsetting is your time, right? It's your time, it's the frustration, it's the ability to consume it when you want, right? So in most things in life, you're on your own schedule, and places where you're going to get a product are on their schedule, and those schedules might not be the same. And so what our customers find is that the benefits of convenience really overcome any really consideration about, return on investment or comparative cost.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it has to be somewhat similar, but it really comes down to, once you own the product, it's a win in convenience every time. And it's a win in performance, right? You're spending a lot of time and money invested in the sport, either as an adult or a child or a pro athlete. The foundation of your game, the skates that you're skating on, really, it's an invaluable thing to have your skates at peak performance. And a lot of players for hundreds of years have sacrificed their performance because of the inconvenience around getting their skate sharpened.
Definitely.
I agree. Yeah. How long does it take to sharp the skate?
It takes about 2 minutes per skate.
Wow.
So in roughly the time it would take you to pack your car to leave for whatever rink you're heading to, you can sharpen your skates.
I'm kind of curious. Is the equipment now is bought by the individuals or by a team?
So when I first started the company, the genesis of it was, I wanted to solve the consumer's problem, right? I wanted to put this sharpener into the home of every consumer so that they could sharpen on their own time with very little effort and have it be a great result. When we launched the product, probably within the first year of it being on the market, we started to get professional users of manual equipment. So the sharpeners that existed before we came out with our product were very manual in nature, and it required a lot of expertise to overcome the inaccuracy of this antiquated piece of equipment. And so all of the professionals that were operating those old pieces of equipment, or some of them, saw our product and saw the benefits of having a product that would allow them to sharpen with very little training, and sharpen with very consistent quality. And so they started buying our product, and that we never saw it coming, which is funny to say in hindsight now. But now they represent a huge part of our business. We have, close to 1,500 professional customers of our product right now. So that includes the majority of the NHL, leagues in Europe, hundreds of high school teams and college teams, and hundreds of retailers, some of the biggest retail chains in the world, publicly traded big companies, are using our product to sharpen skates for the consumer.
That's fantastic, really. How did you reach them, or they reached you initially at the very beginning?
A combo of both, a combination of both. In the beginning, we launched our product on a platform called Kickstarter, which is similar to Indiegogo or one of those, where, it was a way for us to figure out, if we built this product, would people buy it? And through that initial launch, we did gain some early professional user interest. And so shortly thereafter, we got one of our largest, still to date, commercial accounts from that original Kickstarter. And then it spreads by word of mouth. And since then, we've built a sales force that reaches out to customers, potential customers, and shares the benefits of our product. We attend conferences. So.
Okay. So you're talking about the Kickstarter. Is that the way you got your early initial capital also?
No. The Kickstarter, from a capital generation standpoint, was quite unsuccessful for us. We did sell a lot of units in a very short period of time, but we, unfortunately, on the whole, if you look at the whole entire Kickstarter campaign, we lost money on it. So it cost us more money to make the products than we received in revenue from the Kickstarter.
But you gain customers from there. The market, you gain the market.
Correct.
Gain reputation from there, right?
Yeah, and we actually, one thing that we learned was pricing sensitivity, and that was on purpose. So we went out in the Kickstarter campaign with various levels of pricing, and we looked at how quickly those price blocks would sell out. So we initially launched at $4.99, and then it would go up $4.99, $5.99, $6.99. and so on. And we could see the reception by the customer at the various price levels. And that was a great tool. And I actually spoke to somebody recently from a very large CPG company, consumer packaged goods company, who said that they are using that. And this is $1 billion company, and they use the exact same method to figure out their pricing. They launch on Indiegogo as well, and Kickstarter, and do pricing tiers to see what the public's perception of their prices are.
So now, where did you get your capital? I assume that you need quite some capital to get started.
For sure. So initially, I put the seed money into the company, and this is an interesting story. It's definitely was one of the big lessons for me. I hinted at it before, where I was struggling for years, where I felt like I had all of the pieces, but I didn't yet jump, as an entrepreneur. And it really took me carving out a portion of my savings and just basically kissing it goodbye. It was kind of the big gamble, pushing all the chips into the middle of the table, saying, now or never, we're going to see what happens. And I spent my initial funds to go hire a small team to add to what I was doing in addition to my full-time job, because I was moonlighting and I wanted to start this company on the side, but I was just not making enough progress. And it was once I started paying someone else to support the effort that we really started, making headway. And then after that, through that initial investment of my own, we were able to pull together prototypes, put in patent applications, build a business model, rent space, and basically pitch to investors and get other people to believe that this thing which I had built, which was, I'm sure every entrepreneur will feel this, it's like at every stage it's a facade, so the facade that I had built with my initial investment was enough to convince the next layer of investing to come on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you want to share roughly how much capital you got to get full operation?
So, yeah, sure. I'll share some of the beginning. So in the beginning, I had invested roughly about $80,000 in the company of my own money. And then my first round of investment was $800,000. And through all of this, I'm still not paying myself. So that's kind of the interesting part, is I was working in my other job, funding the company, and then we took on capital, and I was still not paying myself for quite a while in here.
So is the company profitable now?
It is profitable. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
How do you get the global customers?
So the global customers came by way of advisors. So this is a great lesson as well, right? Is surround yourself with really smart people with lots of connections, and if you can, lots of money. But on the advisor front, I had met several people that were already in the hockey industry, and one in particular that had spent some time around the world finding dealers and distributors that had met, their requirements. And so that was a huge benefit. A lot of them will come to you. We get inbound inquiries from dealers and distributors every day. And we were overwhelmed at the thought of having to weed through those, because it involved, time spent in Europe or in Russia or in Asia. And at the beginning, we were saying, we're just going to put this off. We're going to, eventually someday, maybe somebody will acquire the company, and this will be upsell to them. This will be opportunity that they can reap later on. But the inquiry just kept coming, and it was coming so hard that it was actually difficult to ignore it. Mm-hmm. And then the key was, we brought on an advisor, a board member, who had built a network of dealers in Europe and actually pre-qualified for us a handful that we could just jump right in with. We knew that they had great, because the big worry, right, as a company is payment, right? So you want to make sure, if you're going to ship hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of product to a foreign country, that you're going to get paid for it.
Right.
And that was the big gamble. So by having pre-qualified dealers, we were able to launch so far in Sweden, Switzerland, and Russia, each of them having their own lead dealers, where we've had no issues with payment. So
I want to get back a little bit. Where do you produce manufacture the product now?
sure. So we're a lot of companies today. We are global. So there's a good portion of our product that's made here in the United States. We actually have a production line here in Acton, Massachusetts, just outside Boston, where we make some of our accessories, our consumables. The machine itself, the brewer, that thing, is made in Malaysia, where we have a very, very good contract manufacturer that's vertically integrated. And what I mean by that is they produce the circuit boards, all the injection molded plastic parts, everything under one roof. Which makes time to market and development much easier than if everything is spread out. And by being in Malaysia, we haven't yet been hit by the China tariff situation, which has been good. And they're a great partner for us. And so
they're really cheaper than making in the United States, right?
I would say it probably is less expensive for all the reasons why we know everything is expensive in the United States. And the United States is difficult to actually produce a product like that in, because where the components of a product like that are made are typically not made in the United States. We've lost those industries over time. And so even if I were to try to make that product here, I would be importing everything from someplace else anyway.
Yeah,
so
I agree. Yeah, I can understand, because there's
those
no
industries.
there's no supply chain.
Exactly. So the supply chain is just doesn't exist here.
Right.
So
I agree. Yeah. Also, the question, you started in 2014, right?
correct.
You said you didn't pay yourself and for quite some time. When did you start to pay yourself?
I started paying so I had started going behind 2014, I had started working on this in 2012. And it was probably until mid 2014 that I started paying myself a salary.
Okay, you got your first round of funding that time, right?
Correct. Yeah, it was probably a little while after the first round of funding that I decided to start paying myself. In the beginning, it was pay my people, because they weren't willing to take the risk without being paid, and then it was pay myself. So
okay, now you have 25 employees.
Yep.
And you're
Yes.
profitable.
We are.
That's great. That's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's a long road. We didn't even talk about it. One of the differences between starting a software company and a hardware business, something where we have a product like that,
right,
is that was probably about $800,000 worth of tooling. So big mold tooling where you shoot plastic into it, and extrusion tooling where you push metal through it. Those expenses, it's almost impossible to start a business like ours without raising money.
Yeah, the barrier of entry is higher usually for hardware companies, and the initial capital requirement is much higher also. But on the other hand, the smaller competitors will be harder to get in, I think.
Yep. So, and you could also say, I agree 100%. You could also say your risk of failure is higher, because right. I can't just rewrite code to
right.
fix a tooling error, right? It's a big gamble once you cut that tool.
Right. So the risk is certainly higher. I totally agree.
Yeah. For sure. So kind of on the note of having to do kind of these big production processes just to actually get something out to market, what were some of the earliest struggles that you had to overcome to actually make this a reality?
And I think this is a funny story. I'd say one of the earliest struggles was we launched the Kickstarter. I think like most Kickstarters, we didn't have as much sorted out as the Kickstarter would have led you to believe. So the design wasn't complete. We hadn't selected a contract manufacturer. And I think it's nice to set a deadline for yourself, And the Kickstarter was about as serious a deadline as I could ever set for myself, because I had promised people a delivery of a product that didn't yet exist in a certain amount of time, and I had taken their money for it. So I'd say one of the first struggles was we had like a clock ticking from the day the Kickstarter was successful to when we first shipped. And so the struggle was getting the design complete with a limited amount of money, and finding a contract manufacturer, and getting to the point where the product could be mass produced. So I'd say that was probably the biggest struggle. Leading up to that, there was another big struggle where we had raised that first round of angel investing, and we had worked for probably the better part of a year. And we had at that point, so this is 2014 to 2015, we had spent a good chunk of the money we raised, and we realized we had gone the completely wrong direction on the product that we were designing. Things weren't sharpening like we wanted to. It was dangerous. It was creating dust that we couldn't manage. And it was a really tough one at that point. We had a board meeting actually where the investors were underwhelmed, I would say is probably a good way to put it. And we realized at the end of that meeting that we needed to crumple up the piece of paper and throw it away and start over again. We just went the wrong way, and we couldn't right the ship from where we had gotten to. We had to come all the way back to fundamentals and just whiteboard it out. What did we do wrong? What do we want as a final product, and start from there. So that was a big challenge.
Definitely. And this, if we can call it, this product's essentially your baby at this point.
Yes.
What did that do to you as a person, having to redo all that?
It was tough. There was some nail biting that was going on internally, because how long you've spent a year driving in the wrong direction, and you're like, well, can I cut across and get there from here, or do I have to go all the way back to where we start? But as engineers who had designed products before, and I think that's really important too, is that we were 3 engineers to start this, right? It was myself who founded the company, and then I hired 2 engineers. We didn't have anyone else influencing us in the beginning. I didn't have sales or marketing or operations or finance or anybody telling us anything other than our engineering backgrounds had brought to us. And we knew then, from having done this for years, this had to happen. We had to stop and go back and start over again. So as much as it was our baby, we knew that baby was ugly and had to get just scrapped. We had to start over.
Definitely.
We messed up.
When was it?
What's that?
When was it? What time was it?
What time of the year?
I mean, which year was it?
Oh, this is 2014, late 2014, around Christmas.
When did you start to deliver the first product?
So we shipped, we did our Kickstarter in March of 2015. And what's interesting is, even though we had scrapped that first attempt, we had learned enough in that first attempt that we could harvest some of the, at least, knowledge of what went into the sharpening, and start over again with the construction, but knowing some valuable lessons. So we were able to go very quickly. Probably it took us a year or so, 9 months or so, to scrap it. And then it took us 6 months to get to launch the Kickstarter, roughly. I'm trying to remember, the second question there was,
when did you start to ship the product?
So 2015 March, we launched on Kickstarter. We promised people 6 months delivery, which was delusional at best. And we shipped our first products in March of 2016.
Okay.
1 year after the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And we air freighted every single unit from Asia over here, back from the machine itself was coming back from Malaysia by plane.
Mm-hmm.
So we had already lost money on the product, and then we were just dumping more money in to not disappoint the customer.
Definitely. So in all reality, finished product, what iteration of it are we talking about? How many stages do we have to go through to really get to this kind of final release?
So probably 3 or 4, I'd say. But from the product that when we sold it on Kickstarter and we eventually figured out the design, that design is very much the design we have today. There may be some minor incremental changes and things for manufacturability, but there's everybody will say it. There's a lot of luck in entrepreneurship, and especially when you have this much money tied up in tooling. In our product, where we were really changing the paradigm here, right? Where we have, it's kind of a little bit of a sidebar, but from a risk standpoint, we're trying to change the way somebody performs a task, and there are thousands of people whose livelihood is tied up in performing the task the old way. So if we stumbled even a little bit, they would have eaten us alive. Like we would have, you know, it would have been like Chipotle hitting the E. coli scare in their first week. Like we wouldn't have done it. Like we would have been out of business.
Definitely.
And so we were fortunate that the product we sold, the product we delivered on day one, those products are still in the market. They're part of our install base. Those are customers that keep coming back to us. They talk about us. Social media is enormous these days, right? So if we had made a mistake, social media would have eaten us alive. So we were fortunate that the product we designed has stood the test of time since pretty much day one.
Definitely. And I mean, in all reality, 3 or 4 products for prototyping is pretty dang quick in the grand scheme of things.
It is.
Right.
It is.
Right.
So on the more personal side of the business,
Sure.
what would you say are the biggest perks of the position you hold kind of as the founder of this company?
God, they're all over the place. I can't imagine, like I look back to 6 years ago when I was debating what to do. I really can't imagine my life having not done this now. You know, everything from I've gotten to meet I've got a really funny story here. I got to meet several of my like childhood idols, you know. Wayne Gretzky has this fantasy camp, and he invited us out a couple years ago to be the official skate sharpener of the fantasy camp. And what was really funny is for my entire childhood, I had this like life-size 6'2" poster of Wayne Gretzky on my wall as I was growing up, and I would like measure my height. It had like a height scale on it. And I remember sitting there talking to Wayne Gretzky like the first day when we got there, and it was this bizarre feeling of like you don't know me, like we go way back, you know. And so it's been like having your childhood idols, Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Brett Hull, all these guys, like, and having a beer with them and hanging out with them at various events because you become a sponsor or involved in their charities and whatnot. So that's been great. Building my own company and putting it in my hometown or the town that I live in and have been in for over a decade, has been really rewarding. I think you don't realize the benefits of, you know, a 5-minute commute until you have one. It makes the ability to go home and be involved with my kids and my wife and still be super involved here at work. That it just makes that really easy to do. And then I love what I do. Like I think for all of the years that I was doing something else, I was trying to figure out the thing I wanted to do. And now I'm always thinking about the thing I want to add to the thing I'm already doing, or the people I want to hire, or the party I want to throw at work, or it's always incrementing on top of what we have here instead of like diluting what I'm building, being distracted by trying to figure out what I'd rather be doing. It's always what I'd rather be doing. I'm in it. So I'd say that's super rewarding.
Definitely. And on the complete opposite side of things, just because I like to ask, is there anything you don't enjoy about the business currently or wish you didn't have to do?
I'd say, and I hate to admit this, but I'll admit it from this vantage point, is that when you build something like a company, right? We have 25 employees and it's very much like a family. And so I've been very focused here, and so have my employees, on building a great culture. Like we reject anyone that's going to disrupt this culture that we're building. And we hire slow, fire fast, all those tenets that you have when you build a business. And so I think the part of my job that I like the least is when something is messing up this careful balance that we've built. When you get someone in who's toxic and they're causing you problems, it comes as close to like family problems, where you get wound up around family problems.
Mm-hmm.
In my old life, when I was working for some place, I would just try to avoid that person, or I would just chalk it up as, well, that's why this company, isn't really where I'm going to be for my whole life. But when it's here, it's like, it really is this culture that we've built, and anyone that comes in and tries to disrupt it, it gets very aggravating and very frustrating, I'd say.
Understand.
For sure. And since we got you kind of on a low, before we'll go back up to a high, what would you say has been the biggest sacrifice that you've had to make to truly make this a reality?
So sacrifice would be, for me, it would have to be, the only sacrifice has really been financial, right? I could have been making a lot more money for the last 6 years than I've been making doing this, but that's really where it ends, for me. And I don't put that anywhere near the benefit that I'm getting out of this, and the business that we've built, which will likely have a payout at some point, which probably exceeds everything that I've sacrificed over the years.
For sure.
But just the benefit of building this culture, having it close to home, it's really cool. Like, I'd always dreamed about being in a sports related company. Like I said, sort of as we kick this off, I love sport in general, like almost every sport. And so to be building a product which improves athlete performance, and building a product which sits in my garage on my workbench that I use multiple times a week before I go play, and that I used to use when my kids played hockey and figure skated. Like, it's so rewarding that, like, the monetary stuff it's not even really a sacrifice in my mind.
For sure. And one of Charlie's favorite questions that I'll go ahead and ask it, is there anything about the company that keeps you up at night at this point?
So Andy Grove, right? Only the paranoid survive. That's kind of the pep talk I give myself. I am a worrier. I'm in general a risk averse person. So becoming an entrepreneur was a bit counterintuitive for probably that kind of mindset. So I worry about everything. We have product sufficient to satisfy our customers' orders. Being a direct-to-consumer company, we see these orders coming in every single day, and I go back and I count things, to make sure we have enough inventory everywhere. I worry about the competition, right? We've carved ourselves out a really nice niche here, and we are really, really passionate about patents as well. So we have 13 patents that cover our technology here, and we're constantly iterating on the design and improving it and locking that down to make sure that we're the only ones that can benefit from the innovations that we've brought to this space, which in our case were large. This industry was largely untouched for a couple hundred years, so there was a lot of room to make innovation. And that's it. Now we're profitable, so now we kind of sit back and grow responsibly, and just try to keep this ship, focused on its mission statement. We want to own every skate sharpening in the world over time, and I think with our technology we can get pretty close.
Absolutely. So on that note, that's a good transition to kind of our next section, talking about what the future looks like. You mentioned potential competitors. Are there any currently out there, or that you're seeing pop up now that you've created this product that truly is kind of revolutionizing an industry?
So our competitors are in a couple different spaces. Our biggest competitor is actually the way it's been done for hundreds of years. It's the guy in the shop who talks to the consumer and tells them that what we've built really isn't good, right? So he's the person trying to protect his space, he or she. And so they're our biggest competitor. There are some producers of similar products to ours, some that were even in the market before us, that had produced product that wasn't as easy to use or hadn't solved some of the big unmet needs by the consumer, and then are also priced way too high for the market. So they exist. And I'd say those are our two biggest. And we think the consumer's convenience and performance will ultimately win out versus the way it's done today for those that want to. I mean, there will always be a professional market, and that's why we have a professional side of our business as well, where we sell to providers of skate sharpening services. And then on the, like product competitors, we're just, we are the most successful skate sharpening company in the world to date. Probably if you combine every other skate sharpening technology out there, pull them all together, we already have more products on the market in 2.5, 3 years than everyone else combined. And so we have the most money being reinvested in keeping that advantage going right now, and we intend to keep that. So I'm pretty happy with where my competitors are, and I'm not scared. But again, I remain paranoid every morning to ensure that we keep up with it.
And on the note of kind of the future of the business, what are we talking like lifespan wise of this product? Obviously, the sold product more in itself is kind of the plug and play sharpening wheels and whatnot. But the actual sharpener itself, what are we talking lifespan? Are people buying more down the road? Are you going to fully saturate the market at some point? Anything like that?
So we've got a long way to go to saturate the market. We estimate there's somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million placements of units that we can have worldwide, and we're roughly 20,000 right now. So there's a long way to go on that road. The analogy I like to use with this product is probably similar to what we've all lived through with flat screen televisions, where we used to have the tube-based TVs, and then we went to a rear projection, and it was this gigantic box in the corner of the room. And then it became a flat screen TV where basically everyone has one now. And I think that's what we're going to see in our market. So we're going to continue to innovate to make our product smaller, lighter, more affordable. And over time, we will capture more and more and more of the market, continuing to innovate on the mechanisms inside the product to provide a reliable, easy to produce skate sharpening as well.
Definitely. And on that note of innovation, are there any actual future plans for changes in the product, new things coming out, ways to make it even better for people?
We can't reveal what we're working on, obviously. But I'd say the analogy I made in the TV world is what we're going to see in our market over the years to come.
Definitely. And moving into the future, are there any aspects of the market or just anything in general that you guys are really excited about or excited to push into?
One of the things that we're launching right now, which we're seeing, from lots of different companies in the industry, is the personalization of product. And so our product works closely with skate steel, the steel that's actually at the bottom of the skate. And so this, I guess I'll release something that we haven't really launched to the public, but it's coming out in the next few weeks. It'll start, is that we will begin personalizing both the skate steel and the sharpener. So you'll be able to add, on the steel side, you'll be able to have players' names, team names, logos, player number. And on the sharpener side, especially for our NHL customers, they will be very personalized. So the Boston Bruins, when they get their machines, they will be fully, decked out in Boston Bruins logos and fonts. And then we're going to be getting into, hopefully in the future, colors. So colored machines. Again, just letting the players personalize the product for themselves so that the product they're buying isn't necessarily the product their friend has, even though it's more or less the same product. It's very much reflecting who they are from a personality standpoint.
For sure.
It's very interesting.
One of the reasons why we're doing that is we know one of the things that fuels the spread of product, right, is people wanting to share it, wanting to show people, right, and post it on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. And so if you just have the same exact product as someone else, you're like, well, why would I even show that picture? But if your product has like your family's name or your family's crest or your little kid's might level hockey team's logo on it, you're more apt to share that. And the more we share it, the more we leverage social media, the more the company will grow and will fuel itself.
Absolutely.
For sure. So on the entrepreneurial side of things, for somebody who is sitting in a similar position as you were a couple of years ago, where they're feeling like they're working towards something, but they don't know what it is, what would be your biggest points of advice for finding that product, reaching market, truly starting a business?
So on the product idea side, I think there are those of us that are walking around in society who are idea generators. I had dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of ideas that I was combing through as I was figuring out which would be the most likely to be successful as I started the company. So if you're one of those people, you probably already know it, right? But then you'll have people say, you know, ideas are, you know, a dime a dozen and they're not worth anything until you execute. So I'd say if you're not an idea generator, you're probably not going to probably just become one overnight either. But if you're a doer, right? If you have the entrepreneurial drive and you want to do this, there was like two key things that happened to me. I'd say if I had to point back and say, why did I jump off the curb? One was I had a job that I wasn't particularly satisfied in, and I was sharing that job with mentors because I was asking them like, well, how do I do it? I'm married, I have 2 children, I have a mortgage, I have car loans. Like, this doesn't even make sense. Maybe I'm not meant to be an entrepreneur. I should have done this when I was 23. The time passed and I just got to just keep rolling the way I'm going here. And one mentor said to me, like, and I remember the exact location he said it. I remember the exact moment he said it. He said, Russ, you don't like your job there and you have a great background and you have a lot of passion. If you try this and you fail, there are so many jobs you don't like. You can just go get another job you don't like. There's many of them, right? Just go back to doing what you're doing now, right? And so the only thing you'll have lost was a little bit of time. That was one. That was key. And I left there going like, wow, that's like really deep. That's like, I can't believe I'd never thought of that. Like I was holding so desperately onto this thing that I really didn't value. And it was letting go of that and knowing, and then betting on myself. Right. And then the other one was hiring people. That was a big one because I was making like incremental progress, but it was never going to be enough to get me off the curb. And the moment I shoved that money into the bank account and I kissed it goodbye and I said, I'm going to go hire people, stuff started happening. And then it was just momentum that carried me at that point. It was like I couldn't get out of its way. It was almost like I was in a casino and I had, I'd started spending money and I was going to spend until I ran out no matter what happened, right? I was way up. And if I just spent it all, it was fine. I was going to leave. And it was momentum and hiring somebody that just like, it felt like it became its own being. And I would have had to fight it off to stop at that point. Whereas before I was trying to get off the curb. Now there was like a thing, like it felt like it was like pushing me down the path.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like you're on to something that you cannot stop.
Exactly. And it was, athletes feel that like when you register for a marathon, you put the money in and you sign up and you tell a friend like, hey, I registered for that marathon. You're running because you've already told someone, you've set money aside and there's expectations. And until you do that, until you register, until you put some skin in the game, it's so easy just to like hit the snooze button or say like, I'll do it later or so.
Totally understand. It's like in Chinese, it's called you're riding a tiger. And
exactly. And it's quite a tiger.
For sure. So on the note of inspiration, is there a famous person, favorite quote, anything like that gets you going in the morning or keeps you moving down the track?
So it was really early in my thinking about becoming an entrepreneur that I read the founder of Patagonia, his book, Let My People Go Surfing, Yves Chenard, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it was the culture he had built and the ideals around the product, and the double bottom line and all these kinds of things that really shined a light for me on how work could be, and also how work wasn't for me. And Raising the Bar, the Cliff Bar story, like these were books that it was like, wow, like those people sound so excited about what they're doing and so passionate about what they're building, and I wasn't feeling it. And so I'd say those books, I remember reading them and dog-earing every page and like running and telling my friends, like, I just read this book and it was just so amazing. You've got to get a copy of it. I bought a copy for a couple of friends. Like, I think those were like, I'd recommend every entrepreneur go read those. And if that gets your blood going and you leave there with your heart racing, like this is the world for you, right? You don't belong working for someone else in an environment that, doesn't excite you.
Definitely.
Your story actually remind me of a person, Phil Knight, the founder of Nike.
Yeah.
And his book, Shoe Dog, is really a great book.
I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list.
I read it 5 times.
Oh, have you really? That's
yeah,
great.
and he's also a graduate of Stanford.
I know, business
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great influence.
Yeah, I hope one day you'll be as successful as him.
Yeah, all of us, I hope.
Definitely. Well, as we're getting towards the end of the process, what would you say you're most grateful for at this point in your life, now that you've truly established the product, gotten it to market, found that it is successful, and you've found that success? What's your most grateful point at this point in life?
So, and this is an easy one, and it sounds cliche, but for me, I think what allows me to do what I do here every day are 2 things: my health and family, right? So my wife and kids, when I'm here and I'm stressed out and I'm trying to solve a problem, like that foundation behind me, that I never really question that. And when I come home, they're happy to see me, and we study math and we go for walks and we just do all these normal things, and there's that foundation behind me. I think it's oftentimes overlooked, but it's not something that I take for granted. And I know if it weren't there, I would probably be focusing a lot more on the fact that wasn't solid. And because it is solid, I'm really able to kind of give this like 130%. And so we've been fortunate that way.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Russ. It was absolutely fascinating to hear your story, and a wonderful time talking with you.
I also want to thank you for being a subscriber of GuruFocus.
Oh, absolutely. I love the product, and I rely on it quite a bit, actually. So
thank you.
For sure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.